Hello, everyone. My name is Igor Tomic, and I'm CEO of Dash Devs. And today you're looking for the Fintech Garden episode for European payments. And I'm pretty pleased to introduce Andréa Toucinho, who is Director of Studies at Partelya Consulting. Hello, Andréa. How are you?
Hello, Igor. I'm very fine. Thank you. And you?
I'm good. And it's exciting times because we're kind of floating into the last months before the summer breaks, and a lot of things are happening on the market. And why I think it's interesting for our viewers to have a discussion with you, it would be good to dive deep more into understanding what is happening with European payments. So the main topic that has been proposed to us is European payments, resilience, regulation, and the race for the control. So how do you feel about this topic?
I think that it is very interesting, and I agree with you with the fact that there are many initiatives that are interesting today in Europe of payments, and I am very pleased to share some insights with you and with the attendees.
Yeah, and that's going to be maybe the first question. Like, where are European payments today? Because we have a lot of changes globally. Like, we see that in the United States, there are changes into RTP, the banking payments, usually, and globally, the card payments from United States are pretty active, and they influence in even European market. A lot of developments happening in Asia and many regions. So, what is happening today in Europe with the payments?
Many evolutions we see today. The first one, I think, is about the evolution of emerging technologies and innovations. We see a lot of solutions today in Europe to modernize the payments ecosystem. We see, for instance, some interesting studies about the role of artificial intelligence. We have also many debates about stable coins, crypto, and all these evolutions related with internet. So I think it is very interesting to study how these innovations can be an opportunity for the evolution of the market. But it is also interesting to study the risks linked with all these new technologies. The second main evolution that I see in Europe today is the evolution of regulation. As you know, today in Europe, we have many legislations that address the payments ecosystem. We have not just the PSD that will evolve towards a PSD3, but also many regulations that have a strong operational impact in the payments ecosystem. I think, for instance, about GDPR in the field of data. We have also AML in the field of anti-money laundering, and also other legislations like MiCA in the field of crypto assets and EIDAS 2 in the field of digital identity. So I think it is very important to have in mind all these legislations and the relation between them to have a strong value added vision in the field of legislation in payments. And the third strong evolution that I see, last but not least, the issue of European sovereignty. Whereas a few years ago, it was above all a political and institutional vision. Today, we have strong operational initiatives in the field of European sovereignty. I think, for instance, about EPI company Wero in France, Germany, and the Benelux countries. And also a similar initiative that was born in the south of Europe, EuroPA Alliance. It is very interesting to see how these two initiatives will converge. We have a strong announcement that we will observe a collaboration between EPI company and EuroPA. So it will be interesting to see what will be the impact of this collaboration in the works about European sovereignty. But it is important also to have in mind another interesting project, Digital Euro, that is also an interesting topic in the field of European sovereignty. And it is different from EPI company Wero and EuroPA because it is a public initiative since it is an initiative created by ECB. So it will be interesting also to see the evolution of this project and its impact in the field of European sovereignty.
That's a long answer and a lot of things to touch, but I feel that we need the confirmation for our listeners that I kind of see that the market is shifting into the practical usage rather than legislation. So what you're saying about IML, different frameworks, different documents and requirements from regulators is kind of more into the practical usage, and sovereignty, it's shifted from academic like a standpoint into the practical execution with the digital euro. So is it fair to say that right now we are kind of in a phase when we're facing an approach for practical execution, all those accumulated legislations and academic approaches?
It is true that today we see in the evolution of European legislation a real goal to foster operational vision. And also we see another strong trend. It is the necessity to foster European collaboration. For instance, you mentioned AML. We see in the 6th directive AML that one of the main topics is to foster the European collaboration. We have, for instance, an institutional association that is related with the European strategy in the field of AML. So it is a strong topic. We see a similar trend in the field of PSD with, for instance, the necessity to foster the collaboration between the different stakeholders of the market to address the new issues of security of payments. A strong example is the case of France. We see, for instance, in France that the security of payment is addressed today not just by banks, fintechs, retailers, but also by telcos. And the future of the French Observatoire de la sécurité des moyens de paiement is also to integrate internet players, since we see that today many cases of fraud are related with the different solutions like WhatsApp and so on. So we see a strong purpose in the field of collaboration between different stakeholders, and I think that it is a strong trend for the future of European legislation.
That's true. That's what I feel from even like a professional service approach, that we are living in ecosystem times right now. So it's not about banks and fintechs collaborating or playing against each other. It's about the whole infrastructure, because definitely in the payment process, we have a lot of stakeholders as telecoms, as real-time messengers, and they deeply involved in the process to prevent the frauds. And this collaboration might improve the user experience and then the rates for detecting issues and kind of mitigate them in advance. That's a good one. And maybe shifting a little bit into the practical, you mentioned tokenization and what particular it means here, because the tokenization word, I think, overused right now. Tokenization in crypto, tokenization in cards. Like when we're talking about tokenized payments, what exactly it means here?
We see many interesting initiatives in the field of tokenization in France. We have seen, for instance, a few years ago, a strong goal and strategy from international schemes like Visa and MasterCard in the field of tokenization. But it is also important to have in mind that local players, such as Carte Bancaire, also have a strong strategy in the field of tokenization. And the goal of this strategy is to reinforce the customer experience and to boost the simplicity of payments operations, above all in the field of e-commerce. And there is another goal. It is a goal of security. It is very important to have in mind that tokenization can also be used to foster security of payments, above all in e-commerce.
That's one of the most practical approach with the cards. To explain to our listeners, tokenization is usually the process of creating the consent for usage of your card. And it's a good example with the e-commerce. You go into the website, you are for the first time, you're putting your card. And then instead of keeping the card information as a full PAN, the e-commerce or platforms which are facilitating the payments for the e-commerce, they take in the consent to use your token of the card. And then instead of paying by card, you're paying actually by this token, which can be revoked. And sometimes digital banks, they provide in more advanced visibility. Like if you authorize the card in Amazon, you can see and you can manage this connection. So it's pretty neat abstraction, which allows another layer of the control from the customer, because you know which e-commerce is using tokenized card. And B, it allows to reduce the fraud, because instead of keeping the card, actually the token, which specific for the e-commerce website or for the payment processing gateway, is hold. So it's kind of another layer of abstraction. And another really good example is Apple Pay, because instead of paying with a card, we're paying with the tokenized card, which is essentially the token. So it's a good movement. And from what I can hear, European Union has a lot of appetite to push the payment gateways and infrastructure to use more tokenization as a fraud detection and prevention tools. That's a really good one. Another question which goes from there, like we're talking a lot and we have a lot of focus for the card payments. What about the banking payments? Because I think one of the advantages of European Union is SEPA payments, which is instant, which is really well defined. Is there any development and appetite to make it more market share for the payments? Because if we take a look on the numbers with the cards, there is a significant number of online transactions made by cards instead of banking rails. But banking rails seems to be really good and quite affordable way for the payments.
Very interesting question. In fact, we see many strategies in Europe about the development of other payments tools, not just cards. So maybe first point to share with you and with the attendees, it is the importance of instant payment in Europe. As you know, the European Commission developed a regulation to accelerate the development of instant payment in Europe, and the goal of the European Commission is to transform instant payment in the new normal. It is the sentence that they choose to qualify the role of instant payment in Europe. So the consequence and the effect of this legislation is the fact that many countries are working to develop this tool in the different countries. So we see, for instance, in France that there is a strong tradition of cards. French people love to use cards both in in-store payments and in e-commerce. So we had some complexity to develop instant payment in the country, but today we see a strong strategy within the different banks to develop these payment tools. Above all, thanks also to Wero API company, because it is a wallet, but the wallet is based on instant payment. So it will be a good point to develop instant payment in the different countries addressed by API company Wero. Other key point about instant payment is the issue of security. In the past, we had many concerns about the security of instant payment, since we have the instantness temporality that brings very strong issues in the field of scoring of risks, for instance. But today, we have very interesting answers from the market about this topic. We have, for instance, the verification of PAYE that is in the legislation addressed by the European Commission. And we have also another interesting initiative that has been developed locally in France. It is the centralization of IBAN that are considered as risks in terms of fraud. It is an interesting initiative that is to be launched in May 7. So we see that there are also many actions to reinforce the security of payments with the context of instantness. So it is a strong point also to explain the development of this payments tool. Other key aspect in the field of payments is also the development of wallets. You mentioned, for instance, Apple Pay, and we see in the different EU countries that many initiatives has been launched in the field of wallets, and we see that it is interesting, yet it will be a strong tool in the future, since young generations are very kind to use this kind of solution. So we will see how it will converge and what will be the different use cases of this wallet in the future. And another example about the importance of wallets in the south of Europe, where we see above all traditional users in the field of payments with the goal to use cash and maybe some difficulties to use electronic payment tools. The strong success both in Spain and Portugal, with Bizum in Spain and MBWay in Portugal. So we see that even if in countries where we have maybe more traditional payment users, we have a strong success of wallets. So I think that this tool will have a strong importance in the future. And maybe last but not least, you mentioned the importance of instant payment, but we have also another SEPA payment tool that is SEPA Direct Debit. And we see that in different EU countries, there are some difficulties to implement a SEPA Direct Debit. For instance, in Finland and in Portugal, consumers don't like to use SDD because they want to have the control in the payment tools. And we see that in these countries, the different payments committees are working to foster the place of SDD in different use cases. So there is a strong work within the different national ecosystems to ensure the diversity of payment tools in Europe, and also the liberty of choice for the consumer. And this idea is also seen in the strategy of the different committees and national ecosystems in the field of cash, because we see a strong goal to foster electronic payment tools, but we will see also a role for cash, even in countries where we have a strong digital maturity, like, for instance, the Nordics or Luxembourg.
I think trust is kind of the root cause for using or not using a specific tools. And direct debit, I think, is a really underappreciated feature in the market, because in the United States, usually the direct debits is using, and there is a really strong example in the United Kingdom, because you are paying basically for the internet, all the recurrent payments usually going into direct debits. And it's quite rarely used still in European Union, but as you rightly said, regulators and overall the government is working with the providing the trust and educating people, because that's the only point how we can get people into using the infrastructure. And that's how we're, I think, sliding into the second part or section for our discussion is the security. And kind of, I feel from your answers that We used to put cards versus banking rails, but the answer might be right now wallets, because it's another trade-off between using the direct bank accounts instead of card payment, but not using the card, because we're kind of operating with a wallet, which can be smart routed between cards or even banking payments in these cases. So is these initiatives, or those initiatives as Wero, they're addressing also the security risk? Because you mentioned there are initiatives for IBANs and more advanced checks before executing the payments compared to cards or compared to banking payments. Like, is it an answer for the security here?
We see that the development of wallets like Wero or even EuroPA bring more security because above all in the cross-border payments, we have maybe more risks in the field of security. And it is also a strong aspect in the field of confidence because, for instance, in the case of EuroPA Alliance, this solution has been created thanks to the success of different local mobile payment solutions, Bizum in Spain, MBWay in Portugal, and Bancomat in Italy. The goal is to capitalize in the trust and the success of these different local payment methods to have a strong European solution. So we see that these wallets, in terms of use, in terms of image reputation, bring also some strong value in the field of security. But it is also important to have in mind that today we are confronted in Europe with many evolutions in the field of kinds of fraud. Whereas a few years ago, the fraud was above all IT fraud. Today, we have a goal to manipulate people. And we see strong issues, for instance, in France about the manipulation fraud that is developing. So today, I think that the payment ecosystem is working about the necessity to educate people about the risks. And we have seen in different EU countries many interesting national campaigns to inform people, for instance, thanks to the French Banking Federation, and also in Portugal with the regulator Banco de Portugal, a lot of communication about the new risks. And the other strategy is also to integrate all the stakeholders of the market in the works about security, to have a real whole strategy to struggle against this kind of fraud.
I think the consequence here that payments, and especially online payments, they became mass market. Like, take a look on the internet payments 15 years ago. It was the area where only the nerds buying the stuff online, because it wasn't even popular with the e-commerce a lot. So most of the acquiring has been in the real world, in stores acquiring. So I think that because the mass market shifted a lot into online paying, and I'm coming from the security degree, and the first thing that you learn first year that the biggest point is people insecurity. So
Yes.
I think it's kind of essential problem, and it will not go away because our technology might evolve and the technology from fraudsters might evolve. It's like a usual spear and the shield battle. But in the end of the day, if our customers are well educated, guided how the process is going, and there is a handover or umbrella from the regulator for educational and frameworks for the stakeholders in the market, I think it's the best case to focus there. Because if people are aware, educated, they less prone to manipulations and those activities from the fraudsters. So that's definitely a long road that we'll see. I would like to explore another angle for the security, because I think a lot of stakeholders, especially in product teams and technical teams, they don't appreciate the resilience of the infrastructure and payments. It kind of overlaps with our experience with the DORA, because a lot of companies has viewed on DORA as an extra burden. But what does it mean, DORA, in terms of the payment infrastructure? Is it bringing any kind of standard, or how it potentially impacts the payments for the implementing of DORA? And I think it's connected with the operational resilience.
Yes, I think that DORA is a very interesting legislation in the field of resilience. And to give you some examples of the work that we do here in France about DORA, we have a French payment association called l'Association du Paiement. And within this association, we have created a working group about DORA. The idea is to study the text and also to evaluate the different impacts for the different payment players. So I think that there is a strong vision and strategy for the payments players about this legislation. And we see that today many payment leaders are working on the implementation of this text. I think that DORA is more related with the resilience for the companies and not the different solutions of resilience related with the different crises that we can observe here in Europe. I think that we will address this topic in a few minutes. But DORA is eventually a strong text for the evolution of payments, I think.
That's true. And that's a question. Is resilience a technical or political concept?
I think that it is different concepts. Resilience, we can study the resilience in the field of technical issues and also for the companies as a whole and also for the different payment evolutions. So here in Europe, we see that resilience is a strong topic and it is related with different kinds of crises, not just the blackout that has been lived in Spain and Portugal last year, but also with the geopolitical uncertainty, with the different climate crisis, different countries in Europe and also at an international level. So we see that in Europe, we have the necessity to bring a real European vision in the field of resilience. And at a national level, a lot of countries developed working groups or plans to foster the resilience of payments. Two interesting examples. In Portugal, the Fórum para os Sistemas de Pagamento, that is the national committee that works about payments in the country, developed working group about resilience. And we know today that the future strategy for the next years will foster this working group and these studies about resilience in relation with the episode of April last year. And other example is the case of France, where we see also many works, above all thanks to our national regulator Banque de France, and also thanks to the local scheme Carte Bancaire, to foster the resilience of payments in the ecosystem in a case of crisis. So we have different solutions to address resilience. Many people think that resilience is related with cash, the necessity to maintain cash in the ecosystem, but it is just not just only one solution. For instance, in France, we study a strong topic, the necessity to maintain the access to cash in the country. And we have many studies and many works about this topic. But the resilience program also includes some solutions to maintain the electronic payments in case of crisis. It is, for instance, the development of offline solutions that we see, for instance, thanks to Carte Bancaire, and also the possibility to have the reconciliation of the payments after the transactions in the case of we don't have internet during some minutes or hours. Resilience is a strong topic today in different EU countries, and in France we see this today.
That's a global question for Europe, and I think that's one of the input for digital euro. Like we recently discussed with Reynald Old the digital euro episode, and we discussed that one of the input is to have offline transactions. So how to make sure, even if there is no connection between 2 points authorized as a payment gateway or maybe authorized point of sale, it would be able to kind of authorize the payment and then maybe execute when the internet is come back to the connection. So that's really important, and I think it's a good takeaway for our listeners, because resilience is not just providing one proven way to execute, it's to provide variety, which is matching the cultural need and the local approaches, because people might use to pay with cash on thousands of Europe, but having the ability to process the payment when there is a blackout or any connectivity issues also important, the same as cash. So that's really good takeaway. And coming back for the fraud evolution, like there is a term FARO which is floating away, and what do you think about FARO and regulatory attempts to standardize response? Like what exactly it means here?
I think it is interesting to work about the standardization of solutions related with the fraud, but it is also important to pay attention to the fact that the techniques of fraud are very different from a country to another. If I take the example of Europe, we see in many EU countries that we have an explosion of the fraud linked with manipulation of people, as we already mentioned. But the different techniques are not the same in the different EU countries. If I take the example example of France, we have development of what we call la fraude au faux conseiller. It is the fake worker in the bank that calls people and tells that your account has been hacked, you will lose your money, so you have to do some instant transfers to another account, and people lost money. It is one of the most popular case of fraud here in France. Whereas in Portugal, for instance, we have different kinds of fraud. It is related with WhatsApp. So people receive message, dear father, dear mother, I lost my phone. May I ask you to send me 100 euros to this account? We have also fake employment proposals. So people receive SMS messages with a proposal of work to do, and you will receive 10,000 euros, and it's fake proposals. So we see that fraud is very different from a country to another. And I will add also about this topic that with artificial intelligence, we will observe in the future a very strong evolution of fraud techniques in Europe. And it is important to have in mind that about artificial intelligence do not have the same maturity within the different EU countries. For instance, in France, it is a tradition of security. So maybe the works about artificial intelligence are not developed in the same way that, for instance, in the UK. That is a country very linked with digital maturity, with a strong adoption of instant payment, of open banking. So I think that it is important to work about standardization of solutions in the field of security, but also to keep national strategy in relation with local habits and local culture in the different EU countries.
Local culture is always important. And I think we see the trend of personalization and putting emotional aspects into the financial instruments. And the same is fair for the fraudsters, because with the advanced tool and technology, it's possible to personalize the threats. So it's basically not just, hey, ma, and for someone who, or family, someone who doesn't have kids, to address, like, I lost my phone as a kid. So by picking up the background information and then targeting specifically for the person, it will be harder to distinguish. So once again, I think, and the takeaway that the only potential answer for those threats is educating people, like to check where the information comes from, do the double checks. And I even heard really a nice approach, like at the family, they agreed to use a specific word as a password in emergency cases. So when someone from family is contacting and saying, like, I'm in an emergency situation, if the person is not using this keyword, it might be fraudster. So there is a key in education and kind of advanced or pre-communication how to deal in those situations. So that's really important. And I think we see that even the regulators will come and will tell certain frameworks how it should be communicated to the customer. So I think it's there. And I would like to slide into the PSD2 and PSD3, because that's, I think, one of the biggest influential thing that happened to European payments for a decade, because initial open banking showed that there is a possibility to share and build ecosystem around the data, but PSD showed that there is a lack of unification. And what do you think the key influences or key points that PSD3 is influencing or going to influence the market here?
I think, first of all, that PSD3 will not be a revolution for the payments ecosystem. It is just a natural evolution related with PSD2. So as you mentioned, in the evolution towards PSD2, we had strong aspects related with security, with, for instance, the adoption of SEA, and also the integration of open banking. And the topic of PSD3 is to address the reinforcements to do in relation with the different evolutions that we observed in relation with PSD2. So today, the PSD3 has a strong impact in the field of security, because as we mentioned earlier, the different strategies of fraudsters are evolving, and it is necessary for Europe to have the solutions to struggle against this fraud. I think that the main point of PSD3 is the reinforcement of security of payments, and we have different aspects related with this idea. And one of the key ideas in PSD3 is the positive vision about the success of SEA. So maybe we will also take the lessons of SEA to evolve towards more security in online and proximity transactions. The second strong point of PSD3, I think, is, as you mentioned, open banking. So we have seen, despite PSD2, a lot of fragmentation in Europe about the implementation of open banking. We had, for instance, some countries that had a very proactive strategy in the field of open banking, such as Luxembourg with the LuxHub initiative. We had also the case of Spain, since the banking players adopted very early open banking with the goal to modernize payments, whereas in other countries like France, we have a more reluctant approach in relation with our tradition of security. So today, the goal of PSD3 is to harmonize the development of open banking in Europe and also to foster the quality of API, because as we do not have the same strategy in Europe about open banking, API are also very different from a country to another. We have in some countries centralized APIs, whereas in other countries, each bank has its own API. So there is the necessity to harmonize all these aspects. And maybe the key point of PSD3, I think, is also the necessity to work about the preparation of the next step that will be open finance. So we had observed here in France many discussions, debates about open finance. Some professionals are against open finance. Others see many opportunities about this paradigm. So it will be interesting to see also what will be the evolution of the preparation of open finance in this context. But the strong first step is harmonization of open banking.
I think open finance can be even the separate topic. There is a lot of dive deeps that can be made and compared to the usual open banking. And the trend that we see at the FinTech Garden, that open finance is really evolutionizing the approach in many regions. Like UAE has released the first license in open finance. So there is something that we can learn from other regions here. And since we discussed a lot of topics, maybe the last question for today, like in terms of infrastructure, can actually Europe deliver all those ambition goals that we see here?
All the solutions related with European sovereignty are very interesting to foster the European infrastructure of payments. As a European professional, I am a strong supporter of EPI company Wero and also a supporter of the Southern Europe initiative EuroPA. I think that both are interesting. There are two different solutions. Whereas Wero aims at creating a new brand, we have in the strategy of EuroPA the goal to capitalize with the success of local payment methods. Both are interesting, I think, and there is a strong interest also in the collaboration between the two initiatives. So I think that all these initiatives will bring new value to the evolution of European infrastructure in the field of payments. But it is also important to not forget the Digital Euro project, even if it is related with a public initiative. I think that it will be interesting to see how it will bring new value also to the future of payments. And as you mentioned, there is a strong link between Digital Euro and resilience with the offline use case. So I think that all these solutions will bring a strong value to a Europe of payments. And it is time today to talk about that. As I mentioned in the beginning of our interview, European sovereignty in the field of payments is not a recent topic in the field of payments, since even if during the SEPA migration we discussed about that with, for instance, the Projet Monnaie in the field of cards. But today there is a strong emergency because we see that we are in the middle of different crises related with geopolitics, economic crisis also, and there is a strong interest for European sovereignty, both in the demand side and in the offer side of the payments ecosystem, and also both in the public and private side. So I think that today all the lights are green to work about European sovereignty, and all these solutions bring strong value for the future of payments.
Thank you. And maybe to make another takeaway, I think usually the answer can be found in the past, and European Union proved that it can handle really ambitious projects like with the euro, because let's take a look. It didn't exist almost 30 years ago. And here we are. We have unified currency, we have the payment rails, we have the banking rails. So a lot of things has been done. And the hidden power of the European Union is diversity. What we heard today is Wero, European Payment Initiation, Digital Euro. It puts a hope that out of the competitive market, the best solutions will appear for the customers and for the government. So I think it's a good example. And thank you, Andrea, today with a deep discussion with the different topics connected to the payments.
I agree totally with you about the diversity of solutions. And I will say that in different EU countries, all the strategies developed by the different national committees are based on the diversity of solutions and also on the liberty of choice for the consumers. That's why the importance of cash today has been highlighted, because even if in different EU countries we see a strong diminution of the use of cash in payments, so we see that the necessity to maintain this payment tool is also a factor of resilience. And it is also important to have in mind that resilience of payments is not just related with one solution or one payment tool. It is a diversity of solutions that brings a real value for the resilience of our ecosystem. So let's work about it.
And that puts a lot of hope and understanding that it will be green lighted and we will see a lot of changes and improvement in European payments for the next years. So thank you, Andrea, for being with us today. Thank you for sharing this information. And everyone, please join into our social networks, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we're looking forward to see you with the other episodes. Thank you, Andrea, once again. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Igor.